Everybody, welcome to System Crafters Live. I'm David Wilson, and today we're back with another instance of our community live stream that we always do on Fridays, and we're gonna have some fun today talking about some Emacs stuff as usual. So while people start filtering in, let me just get a couple things set up here. Make sure that things are working correctly today. I think we're actually on Twitch again today after the snafu that happened from the Twitch hack. If you didn't hear about that, Twitch got hacked this week, or got hacked at some point, and they dumped a lot of Twitch's data and passwords and stuff, so everybody had to reset their passwords, and they reset all the stream keys, so I had to make sure that all my streaming stuff was going to be working today. So if you're watching from Twitch, let me know that you're actually there live, because I can't actually see anything at the moment. I'm going to pull up the YouTube chat in another window too, just to make sure I see everything happening. This restream chat is kind of a pain sometimes, so I have to come up with ways to work around it. Let's see, let me pause this video here. All right, so let's say hello to some people. GNU Ninja, Krishna, Crazy Chicken, John Eastman, Niklaus, Ronnie, Luis, Daigo, Pure Functor, Thokal, Rune, Mark, Sebastian, Alejandro, Purple G, Glenn, I think I saw Glenn there, Karthik, Takis, Bruno. Thanks everybody for joining today. Let's see. Thomas. All right. Horacio, Cameron, Tomas. There's a Tomas and a Tomas. Appenzel. All right, so let's see what's interesting to talk about right now. Trying to think if there's anything interesting happening this week. I'm in process of moving. I'm like selling all my belongings in my house because me and my family are moving to Greece, which might be interesting to one or two of you who are here right now. And it's been kind of a painful process, basically trying to get rid of everything you own and try to make sure that you can move to another country and get rid of your current house at the same time. So quite complex, but you know, it's going well. We're moving pretty soon. It may be the case that I'll have to skip a couple live streams over the next couple weeks. Not Friday streams necessarily, but definitely the Wednesday streams I might have to put on hold for the next couple weeks. It really just depends on how busy I am, because I'm trying to finish up some stuff at work too. So we'll see how all that goes, but the videos shall continue. We'll have a video next week. So those should go unbroken in continuity, I suppose you could say. Hey, Captain No Beard, Case, Solemn Skater, Linde, Mateus. All right, so a couple of, oh, where's my news post? There it is. So a couple of news items this week. Oh, there's another thing I want to mention too, I forgot. So there's a couple blog posts that you should check out this week. One is a blog post about Embark by Karthik, or otherwise known as Karthink, who's here today. It's a blog post called 15 Ways to Use Embark. So if you use Vertigo, Consult, Embark, all those things together, you might want to check out Karthik's blog post about that, because there's a lot of really good tips there about how you can use Embark for various different workflow things that you might want to do. You can check that out on his website, karthinks.com. I'll do a video about Embark at some point as well. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but for now, Karthik's blog post is a very good source for, you know, figuring out how to do certain things with Embark. So it's a really good post you should check out. And there's also a post by Pavel, who's also known as Square Root -1. It's basically a post about how you can integrate Emacs with the i3 window manager, and basically tells you how you can set up key bindings that sort of seamlessly switch between Emacs and i3, which is kind of nice if you want to use a more full-featured or standard window manager compared to something like EXWM, but still have it feel like it's integrated pretty well with Emacs. So check out Pavel's blog post if you want to learn more about that. As always, the show notes for this, where you can click these links, will be in the will be posted to the stream after everything's done. I haven't committed them yet, so they're not up on the website, but they will be there, and you can check them out later. Let's see. Slalom Skater says, I guess you do a lot of does it spark joy questioning. It's more like, do I have space for this, or have I used it in the last, year or so? There's a lot of things I had to get rid of that I had not used forever. Hey, Pavel. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to take a hard look at all the things that you belong and say, oh, okay, this is something that I'm probably never going to use again, and now I got to find out some way to get rid of it. So we've been selling a lot of stuff. It's been a little bit stressful because basically, it's a full-time job trying to sell your belongings. Me and my wife are both selling things all day long. Sebastian says, looking forward to a collaboration with Prot. Yeah, I need to email Prot because I think we'll end up doing something, but I'm not exactly sure when that will be. Let's see. Crazy Chicken says, I watch a ton of programming videos from one dude and use a stock i3, but it is an Emacs god for 10 years. Yeah, it sounds cool. Charlie says, or can I afford to ship this? Yeah, basically. I had to get rid of a lot of books and a lot of music equipment because of that. Steve says, I wish my girlfriend had the option of evaluating S expressions. That's an interesting thought. Hey, Ashraz, you're not late. You're right on time. Everybody's right on time today. Let's see. The other interesting piece of news is that I think that people are starting to get their notifications now about whether talks are being accepted for EmacsConf. I actually just got an email yesterday saying that my talk was accepted, so that's exciting. I'll have to record that now, or I'll have to actually write it first. I only was able to come up with a snappy title, so now I have to do the actual work of writing the presentation and preparing to record it, because they want you to record them in advance, which is kind of smart, honestly, just to make sure that people aren't having troubles trying to live stream their presentation with all these people watching. So, it's kind of difficult making sure that your computer cooperates when you're live streaming, as you might have seen in many of my streams where things go horribly wrong. So recording these presentations in advance is a good idea, I would say. So the topic of my talk will be, the title, I guess, is MetaX Forever, How Emacs Will Outlast Text Editor Trends. Basically, it's just to talk about how Emacs will still be around for a long time, despite what happens with, trends for text editors and just in programming in general. Kay says, sell them to people here. I don't think people want my stuff. I mean, do you want an outside table? That's what we're selling today. For like a patio table? Probably not. All right. So the topic for today's stream, what we're going to do is try to compare the built-in Project.el package to Projectile. So if you don't know what either of these things are, I will tell you. So Projectile is a well-known package for Emacs that makes it easy to run common tasks for code projects. So like, let's say you have a Git repository, maybe you have some code there that needs to be compiled or evaluated, or maybe there's tests that need to be run. Projectile provides you with a bunch of commands that make it easy to set up the different things that you might need to do in a project, like run tests or build it or whatever. And also to find the files that are part of your project, maybe ignoring files that are part of your git ignore. There's a lot of things that it can do for you that makes it easier for you to work on code projects. Now, the thing is that, Projectile is great and everything, but it seems like this should have been built-in functionality in Emacs for a long time, but it actually hasn't been. Apparently, Emacs 26, around 26 timeframe, was the first time something built-in got added for this, and that is the Project.el package. So this is now a built-in package that provides basic actions for managing code projects, similar to Projectile, but not quite as in-depth. So the goal for today is to explore Project.el a bit, because I really haven't spent much time with it myself, and then to figure out whether we can map the functionality between Projectile to Project.el to see, maybe if you can just use Project.el instead of Projectile in case maybe you don't use all the functionality of Projectile. In my case, I do not use all the functionality of Projectile. In fact, I probably use maybe about 5% of the Projectile functionality. So I think that Project.el will probably be a better fit for me, but we're going to find out today by just sort of taking a look at everything and see what it provides. One other interesting aspect about Project.el is that despite the fact that it's built-in package, you can actually install updates to it from GNU ELPA. So it's like an updatable built-in package, sort of like how org mode is updatable, but if you've ever tried to update org mode in the past, you probably run into issues with it. So it's a, there are caveats to it being an updatable built-in package, but it is possible to update it. So it basically means that if you are using, like, let's say Emacs 26 or Emacs 27, and you want to get the latest version of Project.el, you should be able to do that by installing the package from GNU ELPA, which is pretty cool. Case says, a system crafter certified patio table. Yeah, it's not really certified per se. Crazy Chicken says that outside table evaluate S expressions. No, but if you look at it kind of funny, it might look like an S expression, because it's round. Case says, I'm excited. I've been putting off either getting into Project.el or Projectile. I can I can so far, and B, I don't know the difference. Yeah, we're going to try to figure that out today. Hey, Addis and Piotr. All right. So I'm going to need your help today. The people here who know both Projectile and Project.el, I want to know which features you find that are useful that we might actually want to take a look at. I've got a list of some things here that I saw some suggestions for in the System Crafters Discord. Angry Bacon was mentioning some things that he wanted to know about, what the equivalence would be. And there was another person there who was giving some helpful suggestions. I think it was DWG, if I'm remembering the name correctly. So if there are things that you use in Projectile that you would like to know if there's an equivalent for, let me know in the chat at any point, and I'll add them to this list, and we'll try to figure out what the equivalent would be. And also we can talk about some interesting ways to extend Project.el, but we'll do that a little bit later. Pure Functor says, I've been using Project.el as a replacement for Projectile for quite a while now. It works pretty nicely with Selectrum and Marginalia too. That's great. Yeah, I would imagine it works well, mainly because Project.el is meant to be more integrated with Emacs functionality. So since that's the case, it should fit right in with Vertigo and Selectrum, etc., because those are all more wired into the built-in Emacs completion system. So what was the other thing I wanted to say? Oh yeah, so if you use, or if you thought about using EGLOT, I think that's the name of the package, it's basically like a different LSP mode implementation. I think it uses Project.el by default, so that's another way that you could use sort of a more well-integrated experience if you want to use EGLOT plus Project.el for your LSP mode usage, or your LSP, your language server usage for language intelligence inside the editor. Ronnie says, I'm trying to combine Project.el and tabs mode to replicate something like perspective mode, but failing because my eLisp skills suck. Well, I doubt that they suck, but let's see. Combining Project.el and tabs mode. Yeah, I'm sure you could do that. I would also recommend looking at a package by Alpha Papa called Buffler.el. That might actually help you. I think that actually can show you a list of tabs, and it does a lot of other really interesting things too. All right, so first of all, let's try to see what we can do with Project.el. So what I'll do is go to my .files folder, since it's a Git repo, and we should be able to use some of the functionality of Project.el there. All right, so I'm in my Emacs config file. Let's just see what is available under the interactive commands for project dash. There's probably a better way to do this, but we're just going to start with that. So project dired, start dired in the current project's root. So if I were to run this command, apparently a lot of these are bound under Control XP, which is kind of useful. So maybe we can just focus on Control XP for all this. Cool. So we have a pre-made command map for project that's already built in. Usually whenever you're doing projectile configuration, you can, let's see. Let me jump down to my actual projectile config. Yes, so one thing that you are typically going to do for Projectile is bind the Projectile command map. That's a sort of a pre-made command map or key map for Projectile into some key like Control CP. I think we talked about that before in a couple of videos. The nice thing about Project.el is it's already got its own map, which is, you know, pretty convenient in my opinion. You know, Control XP, that's not very hard to get to. So that's already something that is a benefit there. Karthik says Control X, P, Control H will give you the global bindings list, which is pretty helpful. In fact, that's a good little thing to keep in the pop-up there. So if you want to know how I have this nice little pop-up, check out popper.el by Karthik. It's a pretty cool package. All right, so let's see. What I wanted to do was try some of these commands. So I've got some things bound myself, which I don't know why I have them bound. But we can try to use some of these because these are mainly the commands that I'm using a lot of times. Like let's say find file, switch project. I'm using consult rip grep. I noticed that Charlie mentioned projectile grep, RG, AG, etc. So we should probably try to find if there's an equivalent to those. So let's just say projectile grep, RG, AG, in pure regex style, I guess. And yeah, let's just try to see what we can do with some of these. So Control XP and then D for dired. So that's going to jump me to the root of my .files repo. And you could probably tell I was in an emacs.org file, but maybe if I go into this davywill/home services folder, open up this exwm.scm file, I'll hit Control XPD again, and that brings me right back to the root. So if you use an editor, or if in the past, if you've used an editor that allows you to see the listing of project files in like a left-hand pane, or I guess left hand on this side, you could get a similar functionality in Emacs just by running Control XPD to show dired for that folder, and then it's something that you can make go away when you don't need to see it. Personally, I like to keep a more minimalistic view without having a bunch of persistent panes open, so this is something more likely that I would use compared to having like, what's it called? There's a tree view package. I'm blanking on the name right now. Somebody in the chat will tell me, but basically if you want to have a persistent tree view, you can actually have that up, but that's something I don't personally do. Ronnie says, so every time you open a project, it opens in a new tab, and then you get only the project buffers listed with project switch to buffer. Yeah, that's definitely something that you could do with Buffler, I think. Oh, really? Okay, thanks, Ashraz, for pointing that out. Ashraz says that Control XP is only in Emacs 28. The project prefix map is not in Emacs 27. So let's actually mention that. And Ronnie is reminding me the name of the package is Tremax. Thank you for that. So let's write down here that Control XP key map is only available in Emacs 28, or is it in Project.el 0.8.0? I wonder if it's something that's actually in the updatable package. So let's take a look at that actually really quick. Find library. Project, and then project key, what was it called? Prefix map? Prefix map. So we have project prefix map. Do we bind Control XP somewhere here? Not by default. Okay, so this map uses prefix Control XP by default, but I don't see it being bound unless I'm missing it somewhere. Control X. Maybe it gets bound into some other map. How about that? Project prefix map, auto load define key Control X map P. Okay, so that seems to be where it's happening, but it looks like a comment, but I think it's actually an auto load that, whoops, that does get pulled in. So yes, in theory, if you're not using Emacs 28, you should be able to pull the latest version of Project.el from GNU ELPA and then get this key map. So if the things that you see today don't work for you, try to upgrade your package from GNU ELPA. Jeff says it's in Project.el. I have it in my Emacs 27. So Pure Functor says I'm on Emacs 27 and I had to use straight.el to get the latest Project.el version. Works just fine. Okay, that's great. So my guess is that the functionality in Project.el is sort of aware of the various Emacs versions. So if you upgrade it, in theory, it should work right without having any issues for you. So anything we show today should work. And in fact, if you look at package requires here, it says that it needs Emacs 26.1. So that tells you that it should at least work with Emacs 26.1 and higher. Okay, so we've seen Project.del. Purple G says built-in Project.el on 27.1 Control XP does not work, but ELPA does. Great, thank you for testing that. That's great. Christian says, aren't we on Emacs 29 on master now? Yes, that's true. They've already broken out the stable branch for Emacs 28, even though it has not been released fully yet. So master of Emacs is always whatever the development version is. So I think that's 29 now, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so let's jump back to that list of commands. So there's also Control XP exclamation point for project shell command. So let's try that really quick. Control XP exclamation point. I'm just going to type in ls as a shell command, and that gives us a set of output. However, if you want to use that for something like, you know, running a build script or something of that nature, you could definitely do it. And in probably any other command that would be relevant to a project, this is just like a quick way to run a command really fast. Maybe like let's say you work on a TypeScript project and you need to run npm install, you could do that without having to open up a separate shell, which might be nice. Let's see, what's next? Async shell command, basically the same idea. If you've ever used the shell command or async shell command commands before, async shell command is basically a way to run a process without blocking Emacs until the process completes running. It will just give you a buffer where all the output gets written out. So if you run a command that has a long running task, you probably want to use async shell command instead, which is Control XP ampersand. And I think the goal here with these is that it will set the default directory to the project root. Otherwise, the default directory will be whatever the directory of your current file is if you use the normal shell command or async shell command commands. Kappa No Bear says, you might want to encourage people who build Emacs locally to help test the Emacs 28 branch rather than continuing to build master. That's what the 28 branch is for. That's a great point. If you want to help finish Emacs 28 development faster, the best way you can do that, if you're building Emacs yourself, or if you're using Emacs as a built package or Emacs 28 as a built package somewhere, make sure that it's being built from the Emacs 28 branch, so that you can test with using the actual release candidate code base, and then send bugs if you find any. I think there's a command for that. Bug, what is it? What's the command for finding bugs in Emacs? I know it's like, oh, is it report bug? Report Emacs bug. So there is a command called report Emacs bug that will help you to report an issue if you happen to see one with Emacs. So I recommend definitely giving that a try. I need to actually update to a newer version of Emacs 28 myself, so maybe I'll do that too. Ashra says, Project.el can be upgraded in Emacs 27x to 0.8.0. There are some issues with certificates on Windows, which is why I missed the update. Yeah, there's been a lot of issues with certificates this week, so I don't know if it's specific to Emacs or if it's related to all of the Let's Encrypt snafu that happened. Crazy Chicken says, is Arch using 28? I doubt that any official package in any Linux distribution is using 28 yet, because it's not fully released. So in Arch, you definitely have the Emacs Git package in the AUR, however you pronounce that, which probably is using the Emacs 28 branch, but I don't use Arch, so I can't tell you for sure. Let's see. All right, project. You know, this is not really the best way to go through. So let me just pick out things I think are interesting, and then we'll try them out. So first of all, there's some pretty obvious commands, like let's say project switch to buffer. So if you want to constrain your buffer selection to only buffers that are open in the current project, you can use Control XPB, which makes sense because you know, Control XB is switch to buffer. So this is just Control XPB. So let's try that out. Control XPB gives me only the files that are open for the current project. So there's a help buffer that seems to be related to the current project. I'm guessing because the default directory is related to that. Then a couple files, there's a DRED or a couple DRED instances that are open. So that could be helpful if you want to only look at files that are open for the current project. For me, I typically use Perspective.el to have a separate perspective for project stuff, but this could be even better because then you can just have, you don't need perspectives to split up all of the buffers for your projects. You can just use Control-XPB to only switch between buffers that are for the active project that you're looking at. So I wonder what happens if you're in a folder that's not a project. Like, let's say if I go to my, trying to think of a folder I can go to that's innocuous. Maybe there's like a temp folder. Who knows what's in there? Okay. I think this is good. There's no Git folder here. So if I use Control-XPB, yeah, so it wants me to select a project. So you can't just like replace Control-XB with project switch to buffer, yeah, because it's going to ask you to pick a project. But it's interesting that it does pick up on some projects that I may have already opened files in the session, like LiveCrafter or .dot files. So that's cool. Let's see. Crazy Chicken says, looks like I'm building Emacs 28 today. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Pavel says, my pirate exchange IMAP server got screwed because of the certificates. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun to deal with. Control-X peanut butter, is that actually a thing? Peanut butter, no. Okay, that would be pretty good if it was. Rogerio says, there's also a snap with Emacs 28. Yeah, I haven't tried that yet. The Krister says, I finally caught up with the live at 2x speed. I'm surprised that it lets you control the speed on live. I guess whenever you're catching it with a buffer, it does. I should probably use that too. Okay, so what else do we want to look at? So we have switch to buffer, which we saw, which is pretty helpful. There's also project find file. So if we use Control-XPF, then it should give me a listing of only the files that are part of this repository, which is really good if you want to do fuzzy matching against files. Like, let's say if I want to do EXWM, then it will give me any file in the project that has EXWM in the name. This is equivalent to Projectile find file, which I probably should be saying what the equivalents are, but Projectile find file also does the same thing where it will give you a list of all of the files in your project folder. Basically, it is a recursive listing of all the files, so you have every single file that's available to you, and then you can just fuzzy match against them. If you have a completion system that was set up in a way that allows you to do this. Crazy Chicken says, so it looks for projects that are part of a repository. Yeah, it's looking for, so by default, the behavior of Project.el is to look for a .git folder inside of the folder tree somewhere. So basically from the current file path, it looks in the current folder until it finds a folder that has a .git folder. And if it doesn't find one, then it just assumes it's not in a project. Excuse me. So that's basically what your the heuristic is by default. However, it is extensible, so you can use other heuristics for that as well, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Pavel says, it sounded like I installed Exchange illegally. I meant a gateway between Exchange and IMAP, just in case. Well, it sounds better if you say you have a pirate Exchange instance. I mean, it sounds a lot more exciting than just it being, your local Exchange. Okay. Alejandro says only .git folders. I think so. If I'm wrong about that, let me know. Maybe it picks up anything that is actually a VC mode backend also. I'm not sure about that. Let's actually check out info and see if it says anything about this. So project, is it not in? Oh, okay. First of all, we got to go to Emacs. Come on, let's go straight into Emacs here. And then I will press I to find topic, project, what about projects? Okay, working with projects. Okay, yeah, I think this is what Karthik is saying. It finds all kinds of VC. So whether a given directory is a root of some project is determined by the project-specific infrastructure known as a project backend. Emacs currently supports 2 such backends, VC, whereby a VCS repository or a version control repository is considered a project, and EDE, which is expected to be extended in the future to support additional types of projects. I'm guessing there's some kind of development environment. Package that simplifies the task of creating, building, debugging large programs with Emacs. Does anybody know when EDE showed up? Because I've not heard of this before. I'll have to take a look at that at some point, though, because it's probably a good companion to Project.el. Whoops. Let's see, projects. So a project is a collection of files used for producing one or more programs. Files that belong to a project are typically stored in a hierarchy of directories. The top-level directory of the hierarchy is called the project root. And as we saw here, project root is found by basically using the version control backend. So like I said, it could be .git, or it could be like, well, let's see. Is it like VC? Can we list the VC backends? I guess if I go to the version control, come on. If I go to version control, it should probably tell me that. Ashra says EDE might stem from the CDET merge, but not entirely sure. That predates my Emacs usage by some years. Yeah, CDET, I always heard about it, but I never used it, so I don't really know anything about that. Okay, VC commands work with several different version control systems. Currently, it supports Bazaar, CVS, Git, Mercurial, Monotone, RCS, Source, SCS, and Subversion. So basically, any of these version control systems should be picked up by Project.el. So let's say you're working on a project that uses Subversion or Mercurial. Project.el should be able to pick up the fact that you're working in a folder like that and then give you the same functionality that we're seeing right now for a Git repository. Rogerio says EDE is pretty old. That's good to know. Let's see. Purple G said that that's a lot of VCSs I've never heard of. Yeah, like CVS and Subversion and Bazaar are interesting. I used those a while back, but Monotone I don't know about. And RCS, not sure about either. Karthik says more VC backends were added in 28. So probably you're seeing things that are 28 specific since I'm using 28 right now. So you may have to consult your documentation to find out. Oh, hold on. VC handled backends. Okay, here we go. So if you look at the VC handled backends variable in Emacs, I don't know why this is missing the monotone value, but this should tell you which backends are active currently in your Emacs session. All right. Christopher says when you enter a live stream, it defaults to live, but you can drag the video buffer to the beginning. Since it is no longer live, you can change the speed. Yeah, I do that with game streamers pretty often. Karlik said there's also a VC backup package that treats Emacs backups of your files as a version control system. That sounds scary. No love for Fossil and Darks, apparently. I think there's a VC Fossil package, but it's not built in, obviously. Fossil is kind of cool. I haven't looked at it a whole lot, but it seems pretty interesting. Maybe one day I'll take a look at it on the channel. All right. So now we understand a little bit more about backends. So let's go back to taking a look at commands. Let me see if I can find the, let's see, was it here? Yeah. Okay, so there's a compile command, project compile. I think Projectile has something like Projectile compile project. So those are the same. I probably should be writing these down. So how about Projectile compile project is also as project compile. Now the question is, what does it do when you run that? So let's try running, what is it, Control XPC. I like the fact that these bindings are pretty obvious. All right, so compile command. So basically it's just gonna run the metax compile command within the current context of the project root, it seems like, which is, you know, pretty good in most cases, because if you're only using like a single, a Git repository that has a single project in it, then it's gonna work fine. Sometimes I work in repositories that we would call a monorepo, where you have multiple projects inside of it, so this won't work exactly perfectly there, but I think you could probably fix that if you wanted to. Paul Victor says, is there support for darks? I don't think so. I didn't see that when I looked at VC handled backends. Yeah, there's no darks there. However, there is probably a package for that. Let's see if Qt Browser will load up here. So VC darks, I don't know if that's the way you pronounce that. Okay, somebody has written a vcdarks.el package. It's on the Emacs wiki, so you could probably check that out there. I imagine that you can install it from other places as well, like potentially Melpa. So if I were to go here and search for, come on, let's load up. Is anything being displayed? That's a super useful website. Let's see. Let's try. Does it say Melpa here? No. Anyway, there is a package for that if you want to try to use that. Karlik says you can use pop or cycle to switch pop-ups faster than switch to buffer. Yeah, I have not gotten all the key bindings burned into my fingers yet. Let me see. What do I have? Alt. Yeah, so I have it bound. I just haven't been using it. Okay, that is better. Xander says, how can you use Emacs functionality on mobile? Well, if you have an Android phone, you can install a program called Termux. You have to find that on F-Droid because the current one is on Google Play Store is out of date. So if you install F-Droid, you can install a program called Termux, and then you can install Emacs inside of Termux because Termux is basically like an emulation environment or something for Linux. And then you can use Emacs in terminal mode on Android, and it works pretty well, actually. You just need to have a good keyboard that has all the stuff that you need for running Emacs key bindings, or you need to set up Termux to have hotkeys for like Control, Alt, etc. All right, so project compile. Well, there's nothing I can compile in this folder. I'm trying to think if there's another project I can do this for. Yeah, let's try. I'm gonna go to another project, projects, code, hack panel. I don't know what I had set up here. Let's just ignore that. Compilation, recommand, build start. Okay, let's try that. I'll set those. Okay, so I'm in this hack panel folder. I'm gonna use Control XPC. Okay, it didn't pick that up, but I can use npm run build, I think. And it's gonna run that compilation command. And I don't know how long that's gonna take, or if it's gonna completely kill my CPU. Purple G says decent org mode support with orgsly and syncthing. Yeah, that is pretty good. Xander, I don't know about iOS. You can't install Emacs on iOS, unfortunately. So what I want to know is can Control XPC? Yeah, it doesn't automatically rerun the previous compile command, which is a little bit unfortunate. I would like it if it would just rerun the command that I already ran. Is there a whoops? Let's see, is there a recompile? No. Okay, I would definitely bind that, probably to Control XP capital C or Control XP R or something, because I like to use recompile quite a lot. So if I were to go to my compile buffer, let's see, compilation buffer, if I'm somewhere else, you can run metax recompile, and then it will just use the same compilation buffer and recompile the same command that I just ran. So it would be nice if Project had a command for that could remember the command that you ran for the project the last time and then recompiles. Yeah, Rogerio says GR recompiles, or at least in evil mode, GR recompiles, but I have to put my cursor in that buffer first, and sometimes I don't want to have to do that. Hey, William. Come on. All right, so next command. Whoops. So let's see, project or external find file. That's kind of interesting. I'll have to take a look at that in a little bit. So do I have that? Yeah, I took that down. Project DRED, we got eShell and shell are interesting. So we can run those really quickly because those obviously make a lot of sense. So if you run Control XPE, you can get an eShell buffer for the specific project. And that can be helpful if you want to have a separate instance of eShell from your main eShell instance, so that you can, have your command history locally here for that project and not have it sort of polluted with the commands for your normal shell. However, the buffer history or the command history for eShell all gets saved into the same file. So like whatever eShell gets closed last, I think, wins, if I'm not mistaken. So I think there's a little bit of extra work needed if you want to have separate histories per project. That's something I want to actually look into for my own config, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. But the point being that you can easily set up eShell here. It looks like my regex for pulling in eShell actually into the popper section does not catch this eShell pattern, so I'll have to fix that. But it is nice to be able to pop up a separate eShell for each project. It can be pretty useful, I think. Let's see, what else? Project shell, so that's an analog to using normal shell, I think. So if I were to use Control XPS, It's going to pull up a shell mode buffer, which is, well, it's not really like a terminal emulator. It's just, it lets you run bash commands or shell commands and not eShell commands. I wonder if there's like there's not a vterm obviously, but I would think there should be like a term mode at least. Project term. No, there's only projectile run term. But you could probably do the same thing for running a vterm if you wanted. You could set up your own command for that. Let's see. Man, this new messages thing is really getting in my face. What is our round 2 LT? All right, so let me kill this buffer really quickly. As a running process, yeah, I don't need that. Kill that one too. All right, and we can get the analogs for these here as well. Projectile shell, projectile run shell, projectile run eShell. So we can have projectile run shell, eShell to project shell, eShell, which is kind of useful. Xander says, I'm trying to integrate Readwise with Emacs. Any idea how to do that? I don't know what Readwise is. If this is like a read it later type app, then I'm not sure how you do it, but maybe somebody else in the chat knows. Whoops. Okay. So let's see what else. Project kill buffers. If you want to clean up your project buffers really quickly, you could do that. So let's see. Let me open up another file from this project. I'm going to open up this package.json. And it's going to ask me again if I want to add things to the variables list. Yeah, sure. And if I use Control-X, Control-X PB, then it's going to show me there are these 3 buffers here. If I want to kill all of those to clean up my project session, I suppose, I could just use, hold on. I can use, what was it? Control-X PK, Control-X PK. Kill 3 buffers in hack panel. I'm gonna say yes, and then it should get rid of all of those, which is nice if you want to just clean up everything for a particular project. Maybe you want to, get rid of some open buffers because you don't want to see all those there if you do your normal switch to buffer command. So that could be pretty nice. Projectile, does it have a similar? Yeah, projectile kill buffers. So there seems to be a lot of analogs to existing projectile commands. So projectile kill buffers, project kill buffers. So it sounds like, so far there's a lot of comparability between commands going from Project.el to Projectile, but we'll have to see what happens when we look at the Projectile commands as well. Ronnie says, I find Control-X PK not very reliable when I have an EGLOT server attached to the project. Why is that? Does it have an issue trying to kill the language server? All right, Project VC Deer. Now, if you didn't already know, there is a built-in version control system, or not system, I guess version control interface in Emacs called VC mode. It is similar to Magit in the sense that it allows you to do a lot of source control operations inside of a buffer in Emacs, but it is not as advanced in terms of user interface. It can do a lot of things. I'm not really an expert about it, but I know that there's certain people who use it instead of Magit. The one benefit of VC mode compared to Magit is that VC mode supports multiple source control backends. And it's like what we saw before. We saw that list of version control backends that Project can use. It's basically the same set that VC uses because all that comes from VC. So it is it's worth looking into. One day I'm actually going to show it because at some point I'm going to do a series where we go through like a lot of the built-in stuff in Emacs. So we'll take a look at that later. But if you want to try to see what that looks like right now for this project, we can use Control-X PV, which runs Project VC Deer. I don't know why I popped it up on this side. Let's actually pull it here. So if you take a look at this buffer, it gives us a lot of the same info that Magit gives, and like a lot of the things about files that are not committed yet. I think you can look at diffs for files. I'm not sure. Let's see. Yeah, if you hit tab, it will actually open up a diff buffer. So that's kind of useful that you have that sort of built in. So if you did not want to install Magit and Projectile, you still have the same functionality built into Emacs between Project.el and VC mode. You just have to get used to using VC mode instead of Magit if you wanted to do that, which it might be useful. I don't know. I'm actually willing to take to stop using Magit for a while and try to use this only and see how it goes, because I'm curious to see, you know, what the differences would be in workflow. Interesting. Okay, Karthik had an interesting suggestion that I'll try in a moment. But that's basically it. I'm not going to go into anything on this because this is actually VC mode and not something that is Project.el specific. It's just something that Project.el can launch for you. If you wanted to launch Magit for the current project, you wouldn't even worry about having a project command for that, because if you just use Magit status, it's going to pull up the right thing for the current project anyway. So you don't have to do it. You don't need anything special for Project.el when you're using Magit, because Magit knows how to do it itself. But the downside is that, like I said, Magit only works for Git, and if you use a different source control system, you'll need to use VC mode instead. All right. Let's see. Does Projectile have that? Projectile VC. Yeah, Projectile VC is a similar thing. So we can use Projectile VC to project-vc-dir. Okay. Okay, let's see. Captain No Beer says Control-X-T-T to run any command in a new tab. That's cool. Yeah, I don't use tab line mode enough, but it's pretty awesome. I don't know, maybe I'll switch to trying to use tab line mode and Project.el for separating buffers, but we'll see about that. Karthik says VC mode is great, more seamless and better integrated into Emacs. The VC branch display in the mode line is provided by VC, for instance. Yeah, that is a good point. When you're in a folder, which is part of a source control repository. I don't know if it's showing right now. Let's see if I open up Emacs.org again. Yeah, oh, here it is. Right here at the very end, this master actually comes from VC mode. All right, so let's see, what else do we want to look at here? Wait, hold on a second, something's going on. There we go. All right, so project find file we looked at, project compile we looked at. We'll take a look at these two in a second, I think. There's also query replace regex, but now that's something actually that I think Angry Bacon was asking about. So you could try to replace a regular expression inside of your project, I'm guessing. Let me actually look at the documentation for that command. Whoops, let's see. Oh, yeah, right. So project query replace regex. Yeah, replace regular expression in all the files of the project. That's actually pretty useful if you want to do a mass rename of some concept in your repository. So does it also have a project query? Okay, so only it's for query replace. So I don't want to go and change a bunch of things in my .files repository right now, but maybe I can go back to that hack panel project and try it. So let's try, oh. Instead of doing that, let me actually do something else to show one other aspect of this. So there's also a command called project switch project. So let's use that to open up the hack panel project. So I'm gonna use Control-X-P-P, and it's gonna ask me which project I wanna open. And I think it goes based on maybe like recent P mode or recent F mode. And any project folder that's been opened in the past, it should show it up in the list here. So I'm gonna just choose hack panel. And then it's going to give me this dispatch menu at the bottom. So it will ask you what action you want to take on the new project. So in my case, I just want to press D for dired, I think. And now I got to deal with the dir local file that I set here. But I'm going to, let's see, let's open up the source file. Come on, leave me alone. Oh boy, every time I open something. All right, I'm going to find something I can rename. Let's rename, let's see, what's a good one to rename? Auth key promise. There's only 2 instances of that. Okay, I could rename that. So if I were to, well, it'd be better if I could do it across files. How about polar? Chat polar. Okay, so I'll open up, whoops, Magit here. That's the wrong folder. Open up Magit here. Come on. Yeah, I'm typing in. Give it to me. All right. Okay, so right now there's no changes to chat polar. I'm just trying to show like what changes has in effect whenever I run this command. So let's try running Control XPR for project query regex replace. Wait, hold on a second. Let me go back to that buffer. Control XPR. All right, so query replace regex. I'm going to type in chat polar. I'm not going to use any special regex syntax. And then I press enter. Then it says replace chat polar with, let's see, hat polar. I don't know. Now it should go through and replace these. Now it's actually going through an interactive mode, I think here, where if you press question mark, it gives you the list of things you can do. So I'm gonna press Y to, whoops, interesting that it wouldn't let me close that. Okay, let's try that one more time. I'm gonna run Control XPR, and if I press enter, I think it will do the same thing that I had before. So I'm gonna press Y here to confirm this one. Y. So yeah, that allows you to find and replace an entire project, which is pretty useful. I'm guessing this is just built-in functionality in Emacs that project is wiring up to the current project folder. If I press Q, it quits out of that. So that's pretty useful. I would probably have found that useful a few days ago. Ashraz says query replace commands will always prompt. That makes sense. Let's see. Mark says, I added Magit to switch project dispatcher with project switch commands. Yeah. So you could definitely customize that, which is something I'll show in a little bit. What else? Sorry, I'm listening to something I hear outside. I'm hearing some noises. Let's see. Looking for anything else in the chat. Pavel says, can Project.el have different projects in different tabs like Projectile and Perspective? I guess if you just create a new tab and open a project there. My guess is that in any buffer, the project commands are going to operate on the project that buffer represents. So if you can see it here, obviously, like if I were to say Control XPF, it's going to show me files in the hack panel project. But if I go to my emacs.org file and use Control XPF, it's going to give me files in the .files project. So if you have multiple tabs and each tab has its own set of buffers that are visible, then whatever project commands you use in those buffers is going to be related to the project for that buffer. So it will feel like you have separate tabs for each project, but theoretically you can just open any buffer in any tab and it will still work. Let's see. Hey, Foskers. Nice to see you. Give me 1 second. Okay, so next command. Let's take a look at where is our buffer that we were using? Okay, I think that the help buffer got replaced. So let's see. I want to use Control XP, Control H to pull that buffer back up. Cool. So let's see, what else have we got here? I don't know why that all of a sudden isn't highlighted anymore. That's interesting. All right, so Project Shell we saw, Project VC Deer we saw, kill buffers, find regex. I wonder what that is. So if I just click it, probably will give me the help for that command. Find all matches for a regular expression. Oh, okay, so that's cool. This is only for finding files, right? I don't know how useful that will be. What's that command binding? Come on, give me the, all right. Control XP, Control H. Let's go back to this. That was what? Control XPG. Let's search for EXWM. Ah, okay, so it does find all instances of a given term inside of the repository. So that's good. It's not just finding file names, it's finding actual contents of files. So That could be considered similar to, let's see, what was the command that we were looking for here? Replace regex. Yeah, so query replace regex, that is the one we're looking for there. And then this is sort of not a real direct translation, but we have project find regexp, and I'm guessing that's using the internal grep functionality inside of Emacs. You can see that it was pretty slow. Using something like consult ripgrep or council rg or something like that is way faster. So that's what I tend to use for these types of things. But if you don't want to install external packages, this is certainly one thing that you could do to find things inside your project folders. Ronnie says, I'm interested to know what execute extended command does. Okay, let's take a look at that then, because I'm not sure either. So let me click that command to get the help for that. Execute an extended command in the project root. Okay, that doesn't help. Crazy Chicken says, I just use console mode everywhere. Yeah, console and consult both have some helpful stuff for this. So Control X PX. No. Oh, okay. All right. So Control X PX, that brings up a command listing. If I run recompile, that's not the right one. Interesting. Okay, that's probably not a good command for that. So anybody got an example of what you can use extended command for? Karthik says, if a help buffer gets replaced with another, you can use Control O to go back with evil. It's just I with regular bindings. Thank you. That's one thing I obviously did not know. Help, Control O. Fantastic. Okay, I like that. Steve says, I've been interested in Clojure these days. Any other Lisp dialects to check out? Well, you should definitely check out Scheme. And then there's like a million dialects inside of Scheme. Okay. So execute extended command allows you to execute some other command in the context of a project, I'm guessing, but I'm not exactly sure what use you might have for that just yet. Let's see, anything else? GNU Ninja says Emacs 24.5.1. Yeah, that's really old. So project or external find file, I think it will just open an external program for a file if necessary. Visit a file with completion in the current project or external roots. The completion default is the file name at point determined by thing at point. So what was the key binding for that? It was capital F, Control XP capital F, Control XP capital F. Now, if I were to, I am in the .files folder. Why is it doing that? Control XP capital F. Okay, so what about P and G? So it did not open that in a separate program. I'm not sure exactly what external means in this case. Control XP capital F. JPG. Let's open up one of these JPG files. Does it open an external viewer? Nope. Opens up in Emacs. Okay, whatever. Okay, here we go. It finally closed. So I think we saw everything here. Everything of interest. So this is all that whole command map for the Project.el package. But I guess now the question is, if we go the opposite direction, what are the equivalents from Projectile to Project.el? So let's actually use Control CP, Control CP, which is my binding for the Projectile map, and I'll use Control H to pull up the, Control CP, Control H. No. Did it actually show up? No, it did not. Which key is eating it, apparently? Control C, P, Control H. I think that which key is totally taking over right now. Is that right? Okay, that's good enough. So, Control CP, Projectile project buffers other buffer. What? Switch the most recently selected buffer project buffer. Only buffers not visible in Windows are returned. Okay, so that's like some niche functionality. I mean, it's probably useful, but it's not something that you're going to be looking for off the bat. So I don't think that's something that comes with Project by default, and there may be some other way to do that in Emacs. So not something I would necessarily think is worthy of trying to find an analog, I suppose you could say. Run shell command in root, run async shell command in root. We did find analogs for those, I think. Yeah, so there we go. So yeah, that was basically it. So projectile, run shell command in root. And we can say async. And that maps to project shell command, project async shell command, I think, right? Okay. Did I write that down already? It seems like I remember that. No. Okay. Project async shell command. Okay, so that's the mapping there. There's some prefix commands here. Control C P4, Control C P4. Okay, like other window, other window commands basically. Control C P5. More other window commands, I suppose. Not really useful right now. Projectile configure project. So I think that opens up a .projectile file editor for the given project folder, if I'm not mistaken. I wonder if project has something similar. So let's actually take a look at do I have the info still up? Okay, so version control, let's go up. We'll go back to projects. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay. Managing projects, switching projects. Remove known project. That's interesting. So there's a project list file. That's something I didn't know about. So project list file. And this is basically a file that contains all the known projects. So basically when you go to a project, apparently it makes it possible to pull those back up again in the future. So it's not actually based on recent F mode like I thought it was. It has its own way of storing that information, which is pretty helpful. Karthik says the entire -4 and -5 key map was replaced with calls to embark from me. Yeah, you should check out Karthik's blog post about that, because I think that's one of the workflows he shows there, is how you can open any command where you're getting a file listing, and then you can use embark to open, like basically use find file other window instead of find file or whatever the original command was. It can be very useful for composing this kind of behavior with anything in Emacs. So instead of there needing to be a special project find file other window command, you could actually use embark to do that same functionality, and also do it only when needed. So it's a lot simpler, I think. Definitely, embark is a really useful project. I need to work that into my config a little bit better, or into my workflow, I suppose you could say. So let's see. I'm pretty sure that you won't have like a .project file. You're just gonna have like .dir locals, and you can configure project that way. There's no reason to have a separate type of configuration file. So I'm pretty sure that's the case here. Switching projects. I showed that a moment ago. Control X PP to switch projects. Let's see. Project list file. Yep. Okay. Anything else interesting here? Okay, that's cool. There is a variable called project kill buffer conditions, which is a condition list for which buffers get killed whenever you tell it to kill all buffers for a project. So it can be a regex, it can be a predicate function, or a console where you can say what major mode should be included in things that get killed. So that's a nice way that you can configure that behavior as well if you use that quite often. There's also a project search. That's not in the listing. Oops, project search. Isn't it? Oh, wait. There was a command for that. Control XP. I could have swore there. Oh, find regexp. Okay. Weird. So there's a project search command also. And which project are we in? Let's actually go to here. Project search, exwm. Huh. Okay, so it just finds the first thing that it notices, I guess. Maybe there's key bindings. No, there's no local key map. Okay, whatever. I don't know why that's useful. Regex matches in all files that belong to the current project. Let's see if there's anything else we missed here. Don't see anything so far. Here we go. MetaX project search is an interactive variant of find regex. It prompts for a regular expression to search in the current project's files, but instead of finding all the matches, it stops when it finds a match and visits the matched file at the locus of the match, allowing you to edit the match file. To find the rest of the matches, use file loop continue. Uh-huh. Okay, so it does actually go through eventually. Interesting. Dir ed, VC dir, eShell. Yeah, okay. So really the surface area of Project.el is pretty small. However, I would say that what it does provide in the box is pretty useful and probably would solve 90% of most people's use cases. So I probably should try to use it for a while and see how far I can get with it, because I don't think that I need anything separate. I don't need Projectile probably for my own configuration. See ya, Alejandro. Thanks for joining today. Okay, so back to it. Let me jump back to. Wait a second. Help. All right. Projectile edit dir locals. Yeah, that will open up the dir locals file. I don't know if, let's see, dir local. So there are commands you can use for adding dir local variables for the current project, or sorry, for the current directory. There does not seem to be anything like that for project. But I don't think it would be very hard to add your own functionality for that if you needed to. Let's see, there's probably a project dir or some kind of project. Is there not like a variable that gets set in the current buffer? Let's see. Doesn't look like it. But maybe, is it like VC dir? Yeah, I'm not sure what the variable would be. Like basically what you would have to have is a way to find the current directory. Maybe it's a function actually. Project dir current. Project current. Return the project instance in directory defaulting to default directory. So if I run project current, it returns nil, which makes sense because that's not a project folder. But if I run it here, it returns vc.dot files. So if you wanted to make your own function for editing the dir locals file for your project, you could just write an elisp function that sets the default directory to the value that comes back from project current function, and then open the dir locals.el file, which is not a whole lot of code. I mean, we could write that right now, but there's really no point in doing that. Okay, so let's see. Whoops, what did I just do? What else do we have here? I'm gonna go back to the help buffer. I'm gonna use control. No, actually, Control I. Okay. So projectile edit dir locals, projectile find file in known projects. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting command that I don't know how often you would really need that, but I think it would allow you to find a file in any project that you have ever opened, which I don't know if it's going to slow Emacs to a crawl. Let's try it. Control C, P, capital F. yeah, I mean, I'm going to kill that now because it's going to try to index all those project folders and grab all the files, and I have way too many projects, so that's not going to work for me. There's an iBuffer for Projectile. I don't think there's any project iBuffer. Whoops. Okay, there's no project iBuffer. So, if anybody here uses Projectile regularly and you have a command that you use often, let me know in the chat, because I don't want to just go and look through all of the Projectile commands. That would be sort of boring and a waste of time. So I'll try to pick out things that look interesting to me, but I would like to hear from you all also about what you use from Projectile that we can try to find analogs for. Ronnie says, can one ignore some files or folders from project find file listing? You would do that by using the ignore file for your version control system. So in the case of Git, if you open git ignore, your git ignore file for your repository folder and add some files to it, I think they won't show up inside of the project listing. So let's try that. Control X PF. So let me think. There's files in the .files folder. I might be wrong about that. So .files/.emacs profiles. Let me check my .gitignore if that actually is contained in there. So .files. No, okay, it's not in there. So there's a file. Yeah, okay. So this dw-desktop.el file, that should not show up. So Control X P F, and let's look for dw desktop. So there's a backup file or whatever that is here, or an autosave file. I'm not sure exactly which is the right terminology for the tilde file here, but the actual file for DW desktop does not show up because it is in my gitignore. What else? Let's see. Project. Oh, come on. Project-ignore. Okay, so there's no like ignore variable for project.el, it seems. Okay, that might be it. Project VC ignores, a list of patterns to add to VC ignores. A list of patterns to add to project ignores. Okay, hold on, what is that? Return the list of glob patterns to ignore inside dir. Patterns can match both regular files and directories. Ooh, there's something called project external roots. That sounds interesting. Return the list of external roots for project. It's a list of directories outside the project that are still related to it. Now that's pretty nice functionality. So let's say you have a project that is related to other projects that you have cloned. If you want to look for files across all of them, apparently for a particular project, you can add, how would you do that though? Oh, project or external. That's what that was for. Now that makes sense. Okay. So how do you configure that? There must be a, whoa. There must be a variable for that. Ramsey says projectile register project type. Okay, let's add that to the list. Probably there's not an analog to that, but we'll take a look. Projectile register project type. Arya says can't find your config.scm in .files repo. That's because it's being generated. Let's see. Okay, so going back to what I was looking at before here, if I go to the help buffer, is that right? No. So project external, there's a project external roots function, a function that returns a list of external roots. Tags table list. Well, I guess you could configure this with a function that just looks at a variable that you defined if you wanted to do that, but it seems like they should have a variable that you could configure as well that would allow you to say what the external project roots would be for a project. That way, if you wanted to, you could open files from a related project folder. All right. So then what else? Projectile register. Oh, sorry. We were back looking at project ignores. That's how I got on this path. Project ignores. So there's a project VC ignores that you can use to add regex patterns for files to be ignored. So maybe if you had like a folder subpath that you wanted to ignore for a particular project, you could set this up in your directory local variables file to ignore certain folders in your project folder so they don't show up in project find file. All right. What else were we looking at? Projectile register project type. What does that do? Projectile register project type. Register a project type with projectile. Okay, so that's like a whole function that allows you to say what a project folder is. So there's a different way to do this with Project.el, which we'll show in a little bit. You have to do a little bit more eLisp coding yourself, but that's actually not a bad thing. Hey, wind up boy. Okay. So what other functions are useful? So projectile test project, I would guess that's probably still running EmacsCompile just with a test command instead. Yeah, normally you'd be prompted for a compilation command unless a variable compilation recommand is set. You can force a prompt with a prefix arg. So let's see. Compilation buffer name function, and that's cool. You can customize that. I like that. So this is another case where you could use existing Emacs functionality to get the same result, I think. So so Projectile has a few variables. So project command. Let's see, is there like a test command? Projectile test command map. Projectile project test command. So they have a whole, set of functions for running tests. If you wanted to do that yourself, you should just create an eList function that gets the current project directory and then runs the compile command with your test command string. And you could set your own variable up for that if you wanted to. So, I mean, basically with Project.el, they give you less functionality that you would get from Projectile, but you could easily go and fill in the gaps just with a little bit of eLisp code. And personally, I prefer that approach because it allows me to only have the functionality that I actually use and need, and then I can customize everything the way that I want it to be. So, I never use the Projectile test runner commands, but I might actually do it for a specific project where I have like a dir locals file set up to configure what that is, and then run it that way. Ramsey says, with Projectile register project type, you custom... Oh, so it basically customizes a set of variables. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's good if you want it to automatically know how to run a compiler and a test harness for a particular type of project. But for Project.el, I mean, you could probably set up that same kind of thing with a dir locals.el file. However, it would obviously be a little bit more work for you. And then, there's always the possibility of writing your own layer on top of Project.el for your own type of project functionality. And there's also the suggestion that since Project.el exists now, Projectile itself could be rewritten to use Project.el as the basis and just be a set of functionality built on top of Project.el. So I think ultimately that would be a better approach if, Projectile just sort of consumed the core functionality of Project.el while it is a separate package, and then add the extra layer of stuff on top for the convenience things like running tests, etc. There's been a culture in Emacs package development where you end up with like monolithic packages that do a whole lot of things and have sort of their own worldview of how the workflow should be put together. And I think we're sort of slowly starting to get to a new set of packages, or sort of package development methodology where you have independent packages that are able to compose with other packages in whatever way you want because you sort of write the glue yourself, and then you can get the benefits of some added functionality if you want to, and if you don't need that, you don't have to use it. So I would prefer to be in the second world, and that's sort of why I use, you know, Vertigo, etc., because I like that better than using something like Ivy or Helm. Oftentimes with these big packages, like let's say Helm or Projectile, it takes a long time to actually learn all the things that you can do with it, and also to develop a workflow using all the functionality that it provides. You have to have like a whole tutorial just for learning how to use that package because there's so much there. And with Emacs, sometimes I feel like it's better if you start simple without a whole bunch of functionality and then see what you really need. Like you're reaching for a certain type of thing, or you have like a certain set of steps that you do repeatedly in your workflow and you want to smooth that out, make it easier or more efficient, then try to find functionality that fits that. If you have something like a big package like Projectile or Helm or whatever, and you're not using 90% of it, then what's really the point if there's simpler alternatives that do mostly the same thing? That's just my opinion, though. I'm sure there's plenty of people who would disagree with me on that, so take from that what you will. PSB Adjisiu, I'm sorry, I don't know how you would actually pronounce that, but yeah, you're a little late. That's okay. You're here. That's great. All right, so let's go back to command listing. Regenerate tags. That's probably useful if you use tags for completions, but you know, it's probably better to be using a language server these days. Save project buffers. That's something that's not in Project.el. However, you could probably write that. Is there a function for project dash? Yeah, project dash files. No, that's not what you want. Buffers. There's got to be a function because they have that as a the kill buffers command. So let's see, kill buffers. How does it get the list of buffers for the current project? Let's go spelunking in the code and see. Project kill buffers. Project buffers to kill. Project current. Project buffers to kill. So there's another function for that. Let's actually use this. Turn a list of buffers in a project to kill. Project buffer list. So this is sort of an internal function, but I would guess you could call it yourself if you want to. Return the list of all buffers in project PR. So yeah, you could write the same type of functionality that you would get from save project buffers just by calling this project buffer list and looping through all the buffers. And if any of them have a buffer file name, you can just call save buffer on it. Find test file. Now that's some specialized functionality. Basically, it assumes that the type of project you're working on, there's some convention for where the corresponding test code file would be for any source file. You know, if you're writing Ruby code, I think they have pretty good conventions for that, but other languages, they don't necessarily, so it doesn't work for everybody. Ashra says, were you looking for project switch to buffer? No, I was looking for, like, how do you write your own analog to your Projectile save project buffers? Projectile browse dirty projects. What does that mean? Things that don't have checked in files? Yeah, browse dirty version control projects. That could be useful. I mean, if you wanted to, like if you've been working across multiple projects in a single Emacs session, or maybe even across multiple Emacs sessions, and you want to see which ones have pending stuff that needs to be committed, you could use that to find stuff. So if that's something that you would find useful in your workflow, then Projectile gives you that. It's probably not going to be easy to write that yourself. It's possible. I wonder if there's a VC function that could tell you. Let's see. VC list? No. State. That's for a specific file. VC dir. VC get state. What's that? Oh, that's for a specific file. Okay. So yeah, I don't know exactly how you would get the list of dirty files for a given repo. I mean, you could look at all of the known projects, because you have an access to that list. Project, let's see, project list file, projects. Yeah, project list file. File in which save list of known projects. You could look in that file probably and find the list of projects. And then loop over all of those and use some function that can tell you whether any of the files in that repository are, any changes are uncommitted, then you could have that same functionality. But if you want that, then Projectile may actually be a good choice for you without having to write your own functionality. Some of these things could be pulled out in separate packages as well for, you know, more granular and specific subsets of this kind of project management functionality. Karthik, are you here? I think that you mentioned something about Project-X. That's probably not going to help me here. Emacs Project-X. Yeah, okay. So I remember Karthik mentioned something about Project-X. I didn't know if that was actually Karthik's project, but it turns out it is. And apparently at some point in the past I started, so I don't know exactly when that was. But Karthik does provide some special commands that work with Project.el. So if you want to take a look at that, actually, let me look at that. Let me add that to the, let's see. We'll add it to this list. In case you want to take a look at this. What is going on? Thought I unbound those error keys, but apparently I didn't. Okay. We'll pop back up to the previous section. Let's see. Recognize any directory with a .project file as a project. Works if any parent directory has this file. So that's another way to mark project directories without them actually having version control files, which could be useful. Like, say, for instance, if you wanted to make your org roam notes folder a project in terms of Project.el, then if you use Project-X and you drop a .project file inside of that org roam notes folder, then it should treat that as a project. However, you would probably be better served using the normal org roam command. So it's maybe better if you just have a plain folder of org mode files, like a notes folder that you aren't using org roam with. Then this could give you similar functionality. Restoring project state in a new Emacs instance. And that's pretty cool. If you could store project state for like what buffers and windows you had open, that could be pretty useful. I think that Alpha Papa's, what's it called? Burly.el would do a similar thing where it could save a lot of state in buffer lists. Okay. Cool. So let's pop back here. Yeah, if there's anything else interesting about that package, that you want to mention, Karthik, please feel free. So what else? Let's go back to our help listing. Burly does what Project-X does more generally. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, basically, if you want something that allows you to save and restore any window configuration set and buffer listing, then Burly.el is one thing that you can use for that. Let me just pull that up so you can see what I'm talking about. Burly.el, save and restore frames and windows with their buffers in Emacs. So that's another thing you can use if you wanted to save project states or anything like that. All right. Projectile find dir, recent F. Kill buffers. Did we list that one before? Yeah, we got that one. Okay, so projectile commander. That's something that the Angry Bacon mentioned, that he was interested whether there was an analog to that. So, that was something Karthik said here. There's also a timer to autosave the project window state. That could be useful for me because I always lose the state of the project that I'm working on, and I would not mind it if that was getting saved periodically so that I can pull it back up again the next time I open Emacs. So Projectile Commander, let's actually run that and see what it does. Interesting that this is Project 061. thought it was 0.8. Huh, okay, whatever. So let's go back to my .files folder. Open one of the files there. Okay, so I'll use Projectile Commander. So this is pretty interesting because it pops open this prompt inside of the mini buffer with a bunch of prefix keys that are like quick commands to jump to. If I use a question mark, it should tell me what they do. So you could use Projectile Commander to have one key binding that could then pull up a lot of other commands. Now, obviously, this seems like a job for a key map. I don't exactly know why this is particularly helpful for certain people because, you know, just bind a key map, but maybe someone else knows why this is useful. So let's say if I type capital V, oh boy, how many problems we're gonna have here. All right, if it continues to hang, I'm just gonna hit Control G. Yeah, okay, I'm not gonna wait on that. Find directory in project, D. Oh, I need to run Commander again. So D, lowercase d. Okay, so this gives me the list of directories in a project, which is kind of helpful, but Projectile find dir, which is Control C P D, would basically do the same thing. Is Projectile Commander bound to anything? Okay, so Control C P M and then lowercase d. That's Control C plus 3 characters. If you want to use Projectile find dir, it's Control C P D, which is 2 characters after the key chord. So I don't know. I don't really see the benefit, to be honest, because you already have a key map. So why not just use that? But once again, that's my opinion. If there's some benefit to using Projectile Commander, tell me, because I'm not seeing it right now. All right, let's see. You know, that's probably enough of looking at Projectile commands right now. I mean, I'm sure other people have their pet commands they use in Projectile. And if you do, and there's not an analog to that in Project.el, then probably it means that you should be using Projectile. However, for people like me who don't use a lot of the Projectile functionality, I think Project.el is going to be great, and I'm going to actually try to switch to it in my own config pretty soon here. What I do want to look at is how you can actually extend the functionality of Project.el. There's a couple blog posts that I found on that, plus, you know, obviously Karthik's Project.x package. The first one is by Michael Stapleberg, who, if you haven't heard of Michael before, I believe he's the author of the i3 Window Manager, so it's pretty interesting to see that he's using Emacs. This is a post about how you can override the Project.el project directory, and this is something that, let's see. Yeah, this is similar to what Karthik did in Project.x, but it's something you could have in your own configuration if you wanted to. So the idea here is that Project.el is looking for version control repositories, but what if you want another folder to show up as a project folder and it's not managed by source control? So the idea here is to have a file called .project.el that's in a folder that you can use to key off of to get a specific folder structure to be treated as a project. And apparently it's pretty simple to do this. All you need to do is add a function to the variable project find functions, and then that function takes a directory and basically just does whatever behavior that is needed to figure out whether a particular directory is part of a project. And then I think it returns a const of VC and override to indicate that it is a project, or nil otherwise. So in this case, Michael's using the locate dominating file function to look for a file called .project.el inside of the parent folder hierarchy of the directory that's getting passed in. And then if that's actually, so the override variable is whatever the directory is, right? So let's look at the docs for locate dominating file. Starting a file, look up directory hierarchy for a directory containing name. So it returns a directory, and so the directory that the file is found in is now returned with VC and the variable override. So like before, when we use the, let's see, what was it, project current. So inside of this folder, if I run project-current, you see that it returns VC dot and then the dot files folder. That's a cons of the symbol VC and the folder for the dot files folder. And what you're doing is basically returning the same thing, just using your own heuristic to find it. So if we were to just copy this code really quickly and drop it into, let's just put it in my .emacs.d/init.el file. I'm gonna put it at the end. Whoa, okay. Once again, I got sniped by either Consult or Vertigo. I'm not sure which one's causing it. So I'm gonna eval this function. I'm also going to, I'm gonna add this hook to project find functions. I'll make sure that the variable actually has the function in it. Okay, so zkj project override. All right, so now if I go into that temp folder that we saw before, let's see, temp. All right, so now if I run project current, it is not going to return anything because this is not a project folder. However, if I create a .project.el file here, save it, I can kill the buffer. And if I go into the, let's say the SOF folder, let's make sure there's not a git folder there. Okay. And if I run the same command again, project current, it actually will return the temp folder now. That's because the function that I use to customize the behavior of project find, well, what is it called? Project find functions now can recognize this as a project folder. And you can use whatever you want for that. Let's say it's a folder that can create that contains a make file. If it already has a make file, but it's not a Git repository, you can make that be a project folder also. So it could be, oh, also for things like folders containing project.json. So in the case of a monorepo situation where you have one repository that has a bunch of sub repositories in it, and they all have their own project files like project.json or project.clj or whatever, or package.json, sorry. You can use a similar function to detect those directories even though they don't have their own independent Git repository, and then scope your commands to that subfolder too. So that can be useful if you want to have a little bit more control over which folders in your own workflow that are found by Project.el. Kappa No Beer says, if you're using Emacs 28, check out burly.el's burly tabs mode. It does something like that. Yeah, that's a pretty good feature of that package where you can basically tell it to open up all the tabs. What is it? Is it burly that does that, or Buffler? Maybe I'm thinking of something else. I know that in Buffler you can make Buffler open all tabs for the current grouping for the given tab line tab. Maybe it's a little bit confusing. All right, what else? The second one is adding another way to list project files. So this is written by Manuel Uberti, and let's see if it loads up here. So I think Manuel has written another blog post about Project.el. You can see the link to it here, but this particular one is about changing how project files and directory works. I think it is how it looks for the files for the given project. And in that previous blog post, Manuel wrote about how to customize that, but I think he's coming up with a better solution here that fits into the project package, its own sort of extensibility mechanism. So apparently it's using the CL-def method function, which I haven't covered any of the CL stuff here yet on the channel, but apparently the Common Lisp compatibility library in Emacs is pretty robust, and you can do a lot of cool things with it. One of them is to define generic functions. So you can define another instance of a generic function for the project files method, basically, that knows how to look up the particular files for a type of project. So if you wanted to have a different type of project you register yourself, you could do that. I think this may actually be another thing where you're looking for like a .project file, but it is something that you can do to customize things even further. So it shows that you can do a lot of extra behavior if you need to with Project.el. All the extensibility hooks are there. It's just you kind of have to know a little bit more about Emacs, Emacs Lisp, and even the Common Lisp functions to do some of this. But I think it's using FD to list all the files in the directory. I don't know if it's ignoring files, but this would be faster for listing all the files in a very large project than the current approach, which I'm not sure what the current approach actually is. But that's pretty much it. Thanks, Ronnie. I appreciate you dropping by. So Project.el, I think, is going to be great for me. In fact, maybe the last thing we can do here is to go and look at my Projectile config and then set up project instead. I'm using setup.el now. I haven't talked about that yet, but I probably will pretty soon. Now, the interesting thing is that the project file that I opened earlier, Project.el, it seemed like it was an older version. Okay, 0.6.1. I don't know why I have that. I thought I had a newer version because I'm using Emacs 28. What folder path does that even come through? Can it tell me? Okay, this is in... Oh, did I install that? It's way out of date in Geeks if that's the case. Let's check that in eShell. Geeks search project, or Emacs-project. What version do you have? So this is 0.7.1. So I haven't updated in a while, so probably I'm missing things. However, the latest version is 0.8.0 in GNU ELPA. So I think that even this package definition is out of date. What we could try to do is use straight to install the latest, just to make sure we have it. I don't know what's happening here. So I'm going to use package. This is my own custom syntax. Don't pay too much attention to what I'm doing here. Project straight T. And is there anything that I actually need to customize for this? Because the default bindings are good. Find functions, kill buffer functions, list file. I don't think there's anything in particular that I need to customize for this. Other frame map. I didn't look at that. Oh, project switch commands. Okay, that's another thing I should look at real quick. That's kind of interesting. I forgot who mentioned it before, but that is something worth talking about. There's a project other window map too. Yeah, the package macro is a thing that I wrote that can pull packages either from Geeks or from straight.el, depending on which system I'm on. Switch use entire map. Okay, there's a few different things here. Current inhibit prompt. Skip prompting the user in project current. Don't know what that's for. Read file name function. Okay. GNU Ninja says Project.el looks pretty cool. Projectile will have to have a killer feature or workflow to compete. Well, it does have a lot of things that that it can use to compete, because if you need more advanced functionality, you're not going to get that from Project.el. But I would say that many people probably don't need all the stuff that's actually in Projectile. That's my opinion, as always. All right, so let's just start with that. I'm gonna run this. Building project. Okay, so Emacs-project. Do I actually have this in my... No, okay, I don't have it there. So let's look at the project switch. Come on. Project switch commands. So this is actually a thing that you can configure, which will allow you to say what commands you want to show whenever you switch projects. So if I were to use Control XPP, it asks me to switch to another project. If I select Livecrafter, it will show me this list of things down here. Find file, find regex, dirred, vcdir, eshell. And that is coming from this list. You can see it's the same thing. Now, what I don't know is how the letters are being chosen whenever that thing is displayed, because apparently they're not being configured here. I'd actually be curious to find out where that comes from. Let's see. Project switch project. let's move this over to this pane really quickly. What is that? Project.el. Okay. And then pull up the Firefox again. Okay, so make sparse key map, project prefix map, temp map. I think it may be just coming up with the keys itself somehow. So what if we added something to that? So if I go back into my configuration, like what would be an interesting thing? Let's say magic status. Okay, that was what somebody had suggested. I'm not sure who it was, but thank you for the suggestion. So I'll go back into my emacs.org file. Inside this config block, what I'll do is add to list project switch commands. These seem to be sub lists and not const pairs. So what I'll do is add another one called magic status, and then magic status, and that should be enough for that. So if I were to eval this add to list expression, now magic status is added, and I will also reformat this block real quick. Okay. Now if I were to pick up, come on, let's go. Waiting. Okay. So if I were to go Control XPP and switch to Livecrafter, okay, magic status now does not have a character attached. That's very interesting. I'm not sure exactly why that's the case. If anybody knows, definitely let me know. Let me see. There's got to be an explanation for that. So project switch. Actually, let's use Control S. Project switch. Let's see. Project switch commands. A-list mapping commands or descriptions used by each element is of the form command label key. Okay, so I need to add a key to that. So let's do this. I'm gonna reset this variable. Set queue project switch commands. I'll insert that. I think that should be enough. Okay, so I've reset that now. Let me go back into my config. Emacs.org. And then for this one, I'm going to use, I wonder if it's just a char or if it's a string. Key is, label is used to distinguish the menu entries. If key is absent, command must be bound. Okay, that's why. If key is absent, command must be bound in project prefix map. Okay, that makes sense. So then what I'll do is, let me see if I can remember what the syntax is for keys. Or if I could just do, let's see. Can I do KBD M? Okay, well, that's not enough, I think, right? Is it question mark? Yeah, question mark. And then the letter. That's what the syntax is. Let's see if that actually works. Are any of them... Oops. XPP, Livecrafter. Okay, there's no M in there, so if I put M here, it should work. All right, so I will evaluate that. And then I will... Come on. Takes forever to tangle. Okay, so Control XPP, Livecrafter. Okay, now Magic Status has an M key. If I press M, it will load Magic Status for the Livecrafter project. So that's kind of nice. You can configure that pretty easily. One thing that I like to do actually with Projectile, which you can see right here, I think, is set my own switch project action so that whenever I switch to another project, it automatically does some things like create a new perspective and open up Magic Status there. But I haven't seen anything like a hook, like let's say project-hook. There's not a hook. I mean, what I could do is add advice to project switch project to do the same thing, which seems a little bit hacky, but maybe that's actually the intended behavior is you just hook onto that. But you have to make sure that it actually did switch to a project before you activate the functionality. So I don't know, it's a little bit risky, I guess, but you could do it. It is something that I would want to replicate in my config though, so I'll probably figure out a way to do that. So yeah, this is a very nice package that's built into Emacs, has some good functionality right out of the box. You don't need to do anything special to configure it. It should just work for you in most cases, and it does have the necessary hooks so that you can configure it to do some more elaborate things to replicate some of the behavior that you would have been getting from Projectile in the past. So I definitely recommend it if you don't use a lot of Projectile's own behavior. You can just eliminate one package that you install and use on a daily basis, and still, you know, get a lot of use of functionality. So I'm going to do a real video on this at some point to show, you know, like a real use case for how you might apply it in your configuration. Today was just sort of an experimentation session and to investigate how one might use it and what the comparison is. But yeah, we'll do a real video on this in the future after I've used it for a while and I sort of know know some tips basically to share with you and make it actually more useful. So yeah, that's it for today, I think. So let's see. We're gonna have a video on Monday, theoretically, about automatically publishing your org mode based website with providers like GitHub or SourceHut. So keep a lookout for that. I know I was supposed to do that this week, but I got too busy with the move and with work and everything, so I wasn't able to get that done in time. So we'll get that this week for sure. Next Wednesday, I probably won't stream. We'll see whether it happens or not, but just assume that I probably won't do it because I've got a lot of things I'm finishing up on when I move in 2 weeks. So need all the time that I can get, basically. And let's see. Oh yeah, if you enjoy the videos that I'm making on this channel, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like the video because it helps with the YouTube algorithm, and also make sure to check out the link in the live chat and also in the description for supporting the channel if you want to help out in other ways. That'll be very helpful and I would appreciate it a lot. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for being here, folks. I really appreciate the interaction in the chat and all the suggestions and feedback. And until next time, have a great weekend and happy hacking. We'll see you. Thanks.